Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, Shantia's New Chapter. Welcome to another episode of the Worthy, Flirty, and Thriving series. So in today's episode, I chose a really good topic. It's about the narrative that we attach ourselves, the story that we tell ourselves. And I wanted to share the ways in which I've been working to overcome it. Of course, I don't have it all figured out. Every time I'm learning something, I like to come onto my channel and talk about what it is that I am learning. So let's go ahead and dive into the understanding of the narrative we attach ourselves to. So most of us, we come into this life, we have a story, right? There's something behind that story that's driving us towards our pathway. Maybe you experience some kind of lack in something, some kind of lack of love experienced in your home life growing up. Maybe you experienced some kind of lack when it came to money growing up. And so your goal moving forward was to create that experience, to fulfill that. And that's essentially what creativity is. It's a way for us to find a solution. It's a process for which we can find a solution to solving problems. So it's like if you want to fulfill an unfulfilled desire, we get creative and we create our lives. We decide, okay, this is a kind of career path I feel drawn towards. I feel like I can create success as well as abundance through this experience, right? So reflecting on that story and thinking about what kind of story you're telling yourself is important. And honestly, it does take a high level of self-awareness to be presently aware of the story that you're telling yourself. But even so, even if you've allowed yourself to dive in, if you allowed yourself to become a lot more aware of the story that you're telling yourself, the day in and day out work that goes into reminding yourself that this is a story that you have going on in your life, it takes practice. So when I'm talking about the story, I'm talking about, again, what is your upbringing? What did you grow up telling yourself? There are some stories that are really beautiful, like, oh, I always told myself that my dreams were always going to come true. I always told myself that I was always going to pursue this kind of goal and it was going to become a reality. Or is there a lack story that's forming in your life? Oh, because of what I saw or witnessed in relationships, I'm avoiding relationships, or I'm avoiding commitment, or I'm avoiding something, right? If we listen to the stories that we're telling ourselves, we become aware that it's shaping how we live. And most of the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis are very subconscious decisions. So we'll find ourselves avoiding people, situations, or circumstances just based off of our own subconscious desires and fears. I think it's so important to talk about this because most of us, we don't even realize we have a devil and an angel on our shoulder. We have a voice of conscience, we have the voice. Well, I guess it's just a voice of conscience in general, and that voice will challenge us either to overcome a certain situation or to fall into it or fall prey to it. And this is where we challenge ourselves to overcome temptation. Oh, am I going to eat that cookie or I'm going to resist eating that cookie because I know that cookie is not going to make me feel good? What I started to realize was the story I'm attaching myself to is not helping me at all. It's not necessary where I'm going, because it held me in a certain place for so long that wasn't helping me. And I had to realize this. Sometimes we don't even realize that we're telling ourselves certain stories that are keeping us from really pursuing our goals, from really taking off with it, because there's so many fears that are blocking it. But I started to realize that these fears that were created in my body, embedded in my psyche, were stories I kept telling myself over and over again. You know how people say, oh, I'm very shy, or I'm very introverted? Yet, if there's an opportunity that calls to it, if you need to be extroverted, you'll use those skills if you have to. So if we label ourselves, right, if we attach ourselves to a label or a story we tell about ourselves, all of a sudden we immediately limit ourselves from being able to step into the possibility of becoming that thing that we desire to be. So what does this mean? Just like all those videos you watch on YouTube, you have to create a new self-image. But more importantly, I like to keep it simple. You just have to be aware that you're telling yourself a story and you've attached yourself to a story. Frankly, I like to be very open to experiences. I don't like to try to control things, even though subconsciously I am sometimes, right? I have my day-to-day routine because there's some kind of control that goes into it and I'm comfortable with that. But I like to be open to the experience. which means that I don't like to assign this idea that I have to pursue something in a certain way or in a straight line way in order for it to be successful. I'm open to how the experience may reveal to me what's happening. So if I'm just present on a day-to-day basis, then this can help me to overcome the story. So ask yourself that question. What kind of story are you telling yourself? What kind of story is not helping you from being able to move forward or proceed forward? And start telling yourself a different story, quite frankly. Like, start telling yourself the story that sounds fun, enjoyable, and is more the version of you that is in your heart. I talked about becoming your best self and self-acceptance. Our true self, our self-accepted self, is very content, very happy. And if you allow yourself to meditate on that, put your hand on your heart and say, okay, what is in there? You'll start to see what that is, and it'll start to reveal itself to you. Most of us, when we dive into our heart, we start to realize we want to be happy, pretty much, and we want to share that happiness with those around us. And it's as simple as that. The way it wants to be experienced or expressed through you depends on you. It depends on what you're interested in doing right now at this point in time in your life. So be aware of that narrative. I often find myself these days having to really consciously be aware that I have to intentionally let go of that narrative. Anytime I'm feeling sorry for myself or I'm thinking those repetitive negative thoughts that are blocking me from proceeding forward, most of them which are surrounded by this energy of fear, I realize I'm not helping myself. I'm just telling myself this cyclical story over and over again, and I'm not breaking free of that. I have to break free of it by telling myself that's not my narrative anymore. So I constantly have to remind myself, because I'm going through a shift in my life, that that's not my narrative. One of the tips I want to offer to you, other than just being present, consciously aware, and asking yourself what the story is that you're telling yourself, I also want you to be aware of the labels you're attaching yourself to. So what are the labels? Are you calling yourself shy? Are you calling yourself incapable? Are you saying I'm not strong? It's crazy, but when we start to really listen, especially when we hermit ourselves away from all of the distractions in the world, we'll start to hear that these thoughts are on repeat and they're constantly telling you, you can't do this and you can't do that. And then you start to feel all of the shame, wondering why your life isn't shifting in the direction that you want it to, not realizing that subconsciously you've been telling yourself a story about how you can't do it. That's just a story. It ain't true. It's not true. I mean, as long as you're alive, you have the ability to reshape your life in any which way you feel called to do so. It's just a story. So perhaps make a list of some of the things that you feel like you want to become. It's like this and that. I've done this all the time. Every once in a while I'll have this like explosion of wanting to journal and focus on all of the adjectives I want to associate myself with. And I've been doing this for years and years, just saying, okay, I'm this, I'm excited, I'm passionate, I'm loving my life is full of color, I'm doing what I love. Just writing phrases or writing adjectives that I felt like I wanted to be more associated with. And I started to see with just a simple application of day-to-day work, putting in some effort, I was moving in that direction I wouldn't even say without trying, but it was happening so subtly. I was transforming over time. So release that narrative. You are no longer that old story. If you don't want to be that, you don't have to be that. That's the truth. The process for which you get to let all of that fall away, let it dismantle, melt away, it takes consistency, but every day you get to wake up, you get to choose who you are. That's the beauty of being human, is you get to wake up and choose to be whoever it is you want to be. And we all have our moods. I always say we are creative, fluid beings. We have our different moods, we have our different inclinations, and depending on the day, you might want to explore a different flavor of who you are, and that's okay. That is okay. So I want you to know, if you are telling yourself those stories over and over that are keeping you down, that is completely normal. We are all just figuring it out, and we are all just trying our best. We're putting in we're putting in some effort, sometimes some days more effort than others, but we're all capable of doing that. We're just human. Well, we're not just human, honestly. No. No, my spiritual channel, I'm like, well, we are not. We are creative fluid beings. But your human side is very flawed, and just know that that's not something you need to feel ashamed of. The more I've grown accepting those qualities and those parts of myself that are just kind of, oh, I want to be sad and I just want to be low, the more I accepted those parts of myself, the easier it was for me to detach. The easier it was for me to just move on, honestly. So if you wonder why can't I move on, it's probably because you haven't allowed yourself to accept what happened. If you allow yourself to accept it. Also, retrospectively, this is another tip I'd like to add in. How are you labeling your past experiences? So one label that I would like to consciously, I'm going to try to make a conscious effort to let go of this from my experience, is the phrase childhood trauma. Childhood trauma. So this is something, at one point it served as awareness for me. It served as a stepping stone for me acknowledging what I went through, what I experienced, and that was good. That was healthy. I acknowledged, okay, I went through this pain. It didn't feel good. But the more I attached myself to this idea of childhood trauma, I felt like I couldn't really release myself from it. I'm like, every time I think about my childhood trauma, all of a sudden I'm brought back into those past experiences. But I'm like, hey, hold on a minute. How do I make this experience work to my benefit? Instead of calling it childhood trauma, I'm just going to call it an experience. I had an experience. It didn't feel good, but it taught me something. Maybe it taught me how to be more compassionate towards other people. Maybe it taught me how to acknowledge my emotions more. Maybe it taught me the value of healing. Maybe it taught me the value of heartfelt communication. Was it really bad if it taught me all of those things? That's what alchemy is. That's what turning situations into gold is. That's what magic is. And that's how you bring magic into this world. You alchemize that thing and you make it work for you. You went through all of that crazy chaos. Guess what? I'm going to make it work for me. It taught me how to love myself more. It taught me how to love other people more. That's the narrative I'm associating myself with. None of this stuff gets to hold me down and be a anchor for me to attach to my hurts, my pains, and wounds that are healed. I look at myself and I'm like, I am healed. I am so healed. And my mind, because it's used to the story, it's telling me, no, you're not. But I'm like, yes, there are times where I'm just so happy, so peaceful, so content. So content. And then I start to think about my childhood trauma. And then I'm like, oh no, wait, why am I thinking about this? It's just part of your thinking pattern. You can let it work to your benefit. When it comes up, oh yeah, look at that. I remember that experience I went through and it taught me how to love myself more. I went through that situation and it taught me how to never take anything for granted. When I had very little, it taught me how to appreciate everything that was around me, just breathing, my health. So the epiphany I had today, I'm going to end with this and share this with you guys. Oh, actually, let me talk on this point. I want to talk about self-diagnosing. But the epiphany I had today, let me just share this before I forget, is my priorities have shifted. They have shifted. I think has always been there in my heart, but I had to acknowledge that my priorities had pretty much completely shifted. And what's at the top of my priority list is spiritual wealth. I'm like, what am I doing all of this for? What am I, I'm going through quite a shift in my life. And it's like, you're doing it for the spiritual wealth. The thing that you've been craving your entire life is spiritual wealth. You love this stuff. You love this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? That's right. That's the thing. It's spiritual wealth. And when it clicked, because I'm like, you know how people feel like they make sacrifices? They feel like they have to either choose a spiritual path or a material path. I don't believe that, okay? That's not what I've been taught. That is not my understanding of the way this world works. We are material beings. We are very much physical. And us being in a comfortable home or experiencing abundance is a natural consequence of us being attuned to ourselves and our own energy. And I started to realize, oh, I can have both. I can prioritize, but I'm prioritizing things differently. If I put my spiritual wealth, which is my fulfillment above all else, my well-being, my happiness above all else, things will always be good. They will always work out. That's just my belief. So going on to this final point about diagnosing. This is very popular on the internet, all over the internet. Is people are creating channels where they're essentially helping people to experiencing some kind of stepping stone towards acknowledging, again, the childhood trauma, the experiences that they've gone through. Are they experiencing depression, anxiety? Is it bipolar? Is it, there's a lot of different labels, and it's expanding further and further and further. Now, this is what I'm becoming aware of as I'm watching society evolve and how we are evolving as a society. Labels they don't really help anything. They don't resolve anything. You know how you can go to a therapist, talk about all your problems, and still not feel resolved? That's what labeling is. So you can talk about a problem, and maybe it can help you to identify the experience that's going on. But I'm telling you, if you attach yourself to a label, it's going to be hard for you to grow out of it too, which you can, to heal or to transcend it. I know it was somewhat ignorant, but I felt like I knew what I was saying. When I was a child, my dad asked me, which race do I identify with? And I told him American, because I wanted him to leave me alone. I'm like, I'm all of it. I don't care. I'm all of it. The label don't matter. I am who I am. Sometimes labels make us feel comfortable because we feel like, okay, now I know where to categorize myself. But you have to understand, you are a creative, fluid being. It doesn't matter what label you slap onto yourself. At the core, we all want the same thing. How we express it is different, or experience it is different. So just be aware of this self-diagnose. I don't want to call it a trend, because it's not quite a trend. It's like an epidemic. It's not quite an epidemic. It's not necessarily bad either. Because when we talk about these like trauma or hurtful experiences, our pain and our wounds, the more we normalize that it's normal for us to go through those experiences, that's healthy, that's good. But all we really need to do is be aware that we are hurting and have someone acknowledge our pain. And the reason why sometimes therapy does work for people is because by going to a therapist, they finally gave themselves permission to acknowledge their pain. I've never seen a therapist, not saying I recommend it to people to not see therapists. I believe in coaching, I believe in therapy, I believe in talking to people. Quite frankly, I feel like every person on this planet is your teacher. But having those conversations, learning how to journal is what helped me. I just needed to acknowledge I was hurting. Like a child throwing a fit. The child just wants acknowledgement from its mama. You're the mama of you. You're the mama of you. You need to acknowledge when you're hurting, you're in pain. That's it. And it's done. It's like, okay, boo-boo's healed. We can move on. But if we keep reliving the experience, we're kind of just getting caught up in the cycle. So just be aware of the self-diagnosing. Understand that those labels are honestly, quite frankly, temporary and sort of irrelevant. They're irrelevant because you are a creative, fluid being. You are whoever you want to be every day, okay? You are whoever you want to be every day. That label, it couldn't possibly define the depth and the beauty, the multifacetedness of who you are. That's something I just wanted people to be aware about, because if we're so caught up in diagnosing ourselves and then diagnosing other people, it's like a huge trend to call people narcissists, forgetting that we all have a narcissist that lives inside of us. We all have the devil and the angel sitting on our shoulder. If I'm so busy pointing to other people, telling them how they are a narcissist, honestly, I had years like that where I was labeling myself. I'm like, okay, this is my trauma. This is what this person did to me. Am I the narcissist? Am I the empath in this situation? Are they the narcissist? Are they the empath? And I was just like, it's a me versus them thing. I don't like the labels, because I'm like, as far as I'm concerned, I got to make sure I'm watching myself and be aware that sometimes I need to take account I always need to take accountability for what I'm doing, what I'm bringing to the situation, what I'm feeding into it. And for so long, as much as I love talking about and acknowledging those hurts and pains we've gone through, that we go through, I've also fueled it too. You know, it starts to reawaken in my energy, in my body. I start to feel that pain body, as Eckhart Tolle would describe it. In my body, I start to feel the trauma. I'm just like, I'm reliving it all over again. Why am I reliving it? It happened. And it taught me something. It taught me how to be brave. It taught me how to be strong. It taught me how to work with my emotions better. It's valuable. Why do we go through all of that? So at some point, we're willing to wake up and to transcend it. That's it. That's it. Give that gift to yourself. I get to be happy now. Not tomorrow. No. You got the power. Don't give it away. Don't give away your power. People can't use it. They can try to feed off of your life force, but people can't really use their power. That's why those who are so power hungry keep trying to grasp at it, because they don't really got any. And it starts from the inside out. Okay. That's going to be the end of this. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was sort of a winding road we went on for this topic of discussion. But it's something that I realized it's that thing. I'm just like, it clicked with me. I'm like, this is that final little piece, that last piece that I've been needing to release for so long, that I've been attaching myself to. And this also takes me back to a guy, though he is kind of into the diagnosing thing, but he quit therapy. There's a guy showed up on my feed. He quit therapy because he didn't want to prescribe people pills, and he wanted to help get people out of that nature of being stuck. I also have heard people have certain bad experiences with therapists too. So I'm not saying that therapy is bad. I'm just saying that the experience of talking about your hurt and your pain is step one. Move on to step two. This is where life coaching comes into play. Because it's like, okay, I've talked about my pain. I've acknowledged it. Now, how do I transcend it? How do I transmute that? What do I do with that? What do I do with it? You make it work for you. You alchemize it. That's going to be my final last bit. Thank you guys so much. Hit the like to support and let me know what you're thinking. Thank you.